The Fourth Way by P.D. Ouspensky. Question. One realizes the dangers of being asleep, but has one something to compensate for the increasing fear of unpleasantness brought by awakening? Answer. If I am asleep and do not know it, the dangers are there just the same. So if I begin to see the dangers, it is better than not seeing them, because then I can avoid them. Question. I find that when I discover a method to make me remember myself, this works for a few times and then wears off. Answer. You must always change those methods. They do not work for long. It is part of our state. Take it as a fact. There is no need to analyze it. The more new and unexpected things are, the better they will work. This is connected with the fundamental principle of all mental and physical life. We observe, in the ordinary sense, only changes in our associations. We do not feel permanent associations. We notice only changes. So, when you are accustomed to them, you have to make some kind of alarm. Then you get accustomed to this alarm, and it does not work anymore. If you make your alarm clock ring permanently, you will notice it only when it stops ringing. Question. Does the realization of being asleep create its own force for awakening? Answer. If one realizes one is asleep, one must study means and methods to awake. But it must cease to be a word. It must become a fact based on observation. Only then is it possible to speak with more precision and more practically about it. When one realizes one is asleep, at that moment one is already half awake. But it is not long enough. The next moment something begins to turn in one's head, and one gets carried away into sleep again. This is why one cannot awake by oneself, why elaborate methods are necessary. One must be shaken and shaken. Question. And who is doing the shaking? Answer. This is the question. A certain number of people who want to awake must agree among themselves that when one of them is asleep, someone else may awake and will do the shaking. But making such an agreement requires necessity. Those people must really want to awake and must not get angry or offended when they get shaken. Question. What kind of shaking do you mean? Answer. Ordinary shaking. One finds one way, another. Alarms are also necessary, but even more necessary to remember to change them as often as possible. If one feels comfortable, one is asleep. If one puts oneself into an uncomfortable position, it helps one to awake. Pleasant things only help sleep. Question. Can one find one's own alarms? Answer. One can try, but it is necessary to have a constant change and variation, and to choose things that will awaken one. Otherwise, we can awake for a second, decide to keep awake, and imagine that we are awake, when we are really doing all this in a dream, with dream alarms. This is why constant control is necessary, and constant verification as to whether they really awake one or simply create new dreams, or whether one just does not hear them anymore. There is no reason to take too long a thing. There is no reason to take too big a thing. But if one tries to take some small habit and check it, that may serve as an alarm. But only for about a week. Next week, another will have to be found. Perhaps something in connection with the people one lives with, or something like that. One must find many alarms. Question. I find I am more aware of myself when I am alone, so I try to see as few people as possible. Answer. No, you must try to remember yourself in all conditions. If you remember yourself when you're alone, you will forget yourself when you're with people, and if you remember yourself among people, you will forget yourself when you're alone. If you limit yourself to one set of circumstances, you lose at once. The best time to try to remember yourself is when circumstances are most difficult. And the most difficult circumstances are not when we can choose to be alone or not alone, but when you have no choice. And why are the most difficult circumstances the best? Because then self-remembering gives the best results. In early circumstances, if you decide to be alone or not alone, you may get some results, but if you find yourself in a most difficult situation and still manage to remember yourself, the results will be quite incommensurable. Question: is there any action one could take besides self-remembering to discourage inner considering? Answer: do that, and that will show you. It is all the same thing. If you consider, you cannot remember yourself. If you want to stop considering, you must remember yourself. Without remembering yourself, you cannot stop considering. Question: does self-remembering help one to get over such a thing as poor health? Answer: I do not know about that. This is a doctor's business, not ours. We are told that it produces certain chemical effects, but not at once. We can study it only psychologically. We do not know about the chemistry, but we can say that we will feel different. Generally speaking, I can say that every time one tries to study this system from a utilitarian point of view, it fails. This system is not made for that. In some cases, self-remembering can produce a physical result one does not expect, but if one tries to work for this result, it will not happen. Question: but isn't physical health important? Answer: certainly. One must try to be more or less healthy. So, if one is ill, one must see a doctor about it. The question of health is important, but you cannot put it together with the question of consciousness. To use these ideas in the interests of health would be quite futile, though quite unexpectedly they may help. Question: does consciousness require directed attention and will? Answer: all these things: attention, consciousness, unity, individuality, will, all different shades of the same thing. We divide them, but they are the same. We may have them all for short moments, but we cannot keep them. If you observe yourself for a sufficiently long time, you will find moments of practically everything, but only moments. Our main aim is to increase these moments, to strengthen them, to fix them, as you fix a photograph. How should one do that? Answer: all work leads in the same direction. Finding names for the things that we do not possess will not help. It is necessary to do something about it. Question: do moments of attention depend on absence of distraction? Answer: there is always distraction, only we should have control. If we rely on circumstances, work will be in emotional parts or centers, not in intellectual parts. If it is in intellectual parts, it needs directed attention. Our centers are there, fully developed, waiting to be used, but we do not use the higher parts of them. Question: does one have to sacrifice anything besides all nonsense in order to attain higher states? Answer: nonsense is perhaps a good word, but when you sacrifice it is not nonsense for you. Objectively, it may be nonsense, but if you felt it to be nonsense, there would be no sacrifice. Question: there is a conflict in me, and though I know what I want, it does not make any difference. I still do the thing that is bad for me. Answer: this means that you only know. To be able to do is different. Knowledge by itself does not give enough power to do what you want. You have to accumulate energy slowly, chiefly by struggle with imagination, with expression of negative emotions, with talking, and so on. This will give you the possibility to do what is better for you. Question: if you had a different attitude towards things, your emotions would be different, wouldn't they? Answer: what different attitudes and what things? How can I answer? There are millions of things in the world and millions of different attitudes. You see, this is a practical question. It cannot be asked in this language. Try to see how your question will sound to another person, because you know what you mean by different things and different attitudes, but I do not know. Question: I'm asking in connection with right attitudes as a weapon against negative emotions. Does an attitude mean accepting or rejecting? Answer: it is not a question of rejecting, it is a question of understanding. When I speak about right and wrong attitudes in this connection, I mean attitudes to negative emotions in general, and negative emotions in general are a subject for conversations about the working of the machine. When you speak about your own observation or your personal work, you must describe which negative emotion you mean: jealousy, fear, anger, so on. There can be no generalization because negative emotions are very different and attitudes are different. About one, you can say one thing, and about another thing. If we take all negative emotions together, they have a certain common quality. But when you speak about your own observations, you must take things on a different scale, not speak in attitudes, negative emotions, imagination, identification, as though these were abstract things 10,000 miles away from you. It is possible to use these terms for the explanation of general features, but you cannot use them when you talk about your own work. You have a certain personal work to do. You come with a certain aim. You want to get something, and something inside you hinders you. Yet you speak about attitudes, negative emotions, considering, and so on. Speak about real things. These terms can be in a book, and you speak as though you were taking phrases from a book. You must understand that in our system, or any system for that matter, whether it is acknowledged or not, there are 3 different languages, or 3 ways of thinking: philosophical, theoretical, and practical. When I say this is theoretical or this is a philosophy in answer to a question, it means that the language is wrong. You cannot ask something in a philosophical way and expect a practical answer. An abstract question cannot have a concrete answer. You must understand that the difference in meaning between these words, philosophical, theoretical, and practical, is quite contrary to the ordinary meaning attributed to them. The philosophical is the easiest approach. The theoretical is more difficult and more useful, and the practical is the most difficult and the most useful of all. There can be philosophical knowledge, very general ideas. There can be theoretical knowledge when you calculate things, and there can be practical knowledge when you observe and make experiments. In philosophical language, you speak not so much about things as about possibilities. In other words, you do not speak about facts. In theoretical language, you speak about laws, and in practical language, you speak about things on the same scale as yourself and everything around you. That is, about facts. So it's really a difference of scale. Things can be taken on 3 scales, and many things change completely according to the scale on which they are taken. They are one thing on the philosophical scale, and quite a different thing if taken on the theoretical scale, and on the practical scale, quite different again. Try to find examples. Some things can be taken on all 3 scales, some only on 2, some on 1. Even speaking of oneself, one must not mix these 3 scales, otherwise one will create more confusion than there is already, and only understand less and less.